Welcome back, my man.
Hey, welcome. It's not a Monday. It is, in fact, a Tuesday. Today is October 20th, 2020, and it now suddenly feels like the year is flying by.
I know. It's like flying by, and it was like the slowest year in history.
It's creeping. Oh, my God, it's almost over. Because I was looking at like early things next year. I'm like, that's not that. Like someone texted me about a marathon in March, and I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, wait a minute. That's like 5 months away. Like that's not that far away.
It's coming.
It has both, obviously, for a lot of reasons. This year has crept by, and also I feel like the end, which is I think how most things go. It's going by fast. But hey, we appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully our podcast does the same for you. We'll start out slow. We will end fast. That's what we do. It's your first time listening. We appreciate you tuning in. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 418.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I think it is.
I pulled it out of it. Yeah. We usually come to you on Mondays and Thursdays.
That's called flow, man.
That is called flow. Just let it flow. We come to you Mondays and Thursdays for the most part. Not this week. We had a trail camp this last week. But regardless, we come to you twice a week, and we have for the last 4 years, and we'll continue to do so as long as we have at least 2 or 3 of you listening to us. But we talk about all things triathlon and all things life. We cover swim, bike, run, nutrition. We have race recaps, race previews, which we will start doing more of because races are and it is fantastic. We had the very first, not the first one in North America because they had Cosimo, but the first Ironman branded 70.3 race, a larger race here in the U.S. that was in Tempe over the weekend. I had an athlete that did it personally. I had another athlete that was there volunteering, and then read a couple of reviews from it. And I'll go into that in a minute. But it's exciting. It's exciting for things to be back. But we'll do race recaps and race previews, which are very popular among our archives. So if you haven't listened before, dig back. Mike does an outstanding job of outlining each podcast that we do and kind of going over the topics that we hit. But for the most part, we just have an open, honest discussion. We have no sponsors. We have no ads. We won't break in the next 30 seconds to give you a sponsored ad from the avocado mattress. But we will just share with you our experiences and what we've gone through both as athletes and coaches over the last, myself, 15, 20 years, Mike for 9 or 10. And that's what we do. Open, honest conversation. We see where it takes us, and we hope you can take the ride along with us.
Yeah, we won't have any specific advertisers like that, but we do want to mention the C26 Club.
You're doing
we
better.
We can talk about
man.
our own thing, man. We're going to set you up with a training plan for the whole next year. There's going to be access to the online hub, a community of stuff, and all kinds of great information. You can check that out at C26triathlon.com. There's a banner you can click on the front page, or you can drop down the coaches menu and click on the club, and it'll tell you all about it, what's all in there. There's a lot of good offerings, and we'll take the worry and the, what's the other word? Confusion out of your year, stress, and set you up for a plan for all next year based around the races that you pick. And it's funny, man. I did have a guy text me this morning. He's like, man, hey, you think that chat 70.3 is going to happen? And I was like, well, if it doesn't, man, we got bigger problems than triathlons. That's the only way I can really look at it. But, yeah, it's exciting, man, that we got one off here in the States.
And I do have to say, and I think, one of my biggest reasons for being so almost annoyingly positive with that people are going to race this year is because, racing, while albeit a privilege, which it is races are also businesses, and businesses, like all other businesses in a pandemic and lockdown and with, unbelievable restrictions, you have to be able to adapt and you have to be able to be flexible, which is honestly, like if you look at, just the regular, any other business, you look at people that are being really successful right now are doing a really, really good job of being flexible. They're just finding a way to make things work. And, while it's not easy, I mean, there are plenty of restraints that we have and the things that we do, but you have to be flexible, and you have to be responsive, and you have to be responsible, and people are going to find a way. And so one of the most important things I think for Ironman, which is the biggest brand and obviously the biggest kind of the giant in the industry of triathlon, is that they needed to get one off so they can fine tune what they're going to do next. And that's why I think it was so huge to get Tempe off and actually happen, even though I'm sure most athletes, because you've had so many, races like Lubbock and then Muncie, who were the plug was pulled, fairly quick to race. It was almost like, I'm not really going to believe it until I'm in my wetsuit standing at the start line to get it done. And even then you're I definitely need to get in the water before this is actually going to happen. But from everything that I read and from the personal experience, one of our athletes had, she said it was an absolute and I'm one of the first people to criticize Ironman because I think, the giants in the industry should be criticized when it's fair. But from everything I've read from multiple people and also media outlets and resources, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. So whether you want to argue that it was irresponsible or responsible to race, that's up to the athletes that actually toe the line. If you don't want to race, then don't race. But for the athletes that did, the ones that showed up, from what I understand, it was efficient, it was safe. They had things like a well-oiled machine, which is, I think, especially should be noted because they have obviously laid off quite a few of their staff to kind of like work at like a bare bones, because they're just not putting a lot of races. It doesn't make sense for a business to, like, you wouldn't expect another business, you walk into a restaurant at, 10 o'clock at night and there's only 4 tables sat. You don't expect to see 50 servers sitting around. People get cut, people go home. That's what happens. And so kind of putting on like a bare bones, limited staff and event management people is like they did a really, really great job. And then the other part obviously was that you got a chance to get out there, and this athlete specifically said, she was in transition talking to another girl, and she was like, I can't believe we got here. Like, I can't believe we get to race. I can't believe it's about to happen. They had things spaced out accordingly for the swim, and then they did things well on the bike. They eliminated out and backs on the run to make it a circle. Like, they really, really did a great job. I think it's going to be interesting to see in the next coming weeks and months. And then next year, depending on how things go, like what, because, out and backs and specific loops are at the core of how a lot of races are able to be put on. Like they are able to, because, logistics and what they get permits for the city. I think that might actually be one of the difficulties they have with maybe with the full in Ironman Arizona, because it is so many loops and they're trying to eliminate as many crossings as they can. Yeah. But I'm sure they're trying to manage it, and that's going to be, I think, something that they'll have to take into account for races that are coming. But on the, I got nothing but positive, so I think it's positive for all of us. I hope everyone kind of takes that and puts it in their pocket and says, hey, races have happened. They're going to continue to happen. For all accounts, Ironman Florida and Ironman Florida 70.3 are both going to happen here in like 2.5 weeks. They're happening. We're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to be flexible. I think the athlete briefing was on a YouTube, which in my opinion is like, should be done forever. Like, I can't think of a better thing to do to watch an athlete briefing than to sit back in your own bed at your hotel or your Airbnb or whatever and watch it, versus sitting packed in underneath a tent in 100-degree heat with 150 other triathletes asking questions they shouldn't be asking because they haven't read the athlete guide. Like, it should be on YouTube forever. Like, that's how it should be. Yeah. And they shouldn't, offer 19,000 different athlete, briefing times. But anyway, it happened. It went well. And so kudos to Ironman. And I think it should give, and hopefully it gives athletes a really, I guess there's more optimism for things to get back, which is, it's just been I don't mean it's been a long year as in like, oh, it's 2020, it's 2020. Like, we keep saying that, and frankly, it's getting old. But just for the fact that most people have been training without having an opportunity to race and really get out there and express their fitness and just have an opportunity to get out there and do it for 8, 10, 12, some people longer months. So I think it's fun. I think it's well-deserved for the athletes that have seen it through, that have not quit, and that have stayed optimistic, and they're, being able now to, see the fruits of their labor. Yeah.
No, I mean, I've got a couple questions. I think it's interesting you said that, they have been trying to figure out how to keep it going with, Ironman obviously has a lot of employees, and haven't been working and things like that. And, now we've got, they've got like a whole, like the races themselves are a massive sort of, experiment in safety as it is, you know what I mean? Like with making sure there's enough kayaks out there and there's enough safety on the bike course and all these sorts of things. And now we've got this other thing thrown at them. And I just hope that doesn't become like, well, we can't have extra kayaks because we need another person in line making sure people are, 6 feet apart or something like that. So there's got to be a weird like dynamic there where they have to like be thinking about. It's almost like the safety concern thing has almost doubled in their mix. So let's just hope that like these course changes and all these things that we're putting in place don't create another problem.
I don't think it's created another problem. I think we're going to have to get accustomed to things being a little different until they're not. And that's, listen, everything in life changes. And when it does change, it's this huge inconvenience and everyone has a hard time adjusting to it. And then it becomes normal again, and it's just like what we get used to. And then we don't think about the way things used to be. It's kind of like, mass starts. Like everyone was, it's like, I knew you were going, man. Like I know you're bitter with the mass start. I know
you are too. And so is Mike Riley.
Oh, Mike. Yeah, I'm not bitter about it. I do.
You won't admit it though.
It's pro Ironman. You don't want to be conflict of interest. I'm not bitter about there not being more mass starts. I feel like I think it does take away from the overall experience. And I feel like I feel like they should go back to what we suggested like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where they should have, if you sign up for the race, and you want to participate in the mass start, then you participate in it. If you don't, then you go to the back of the line and you are a time trial start. But let everyone else who wants that experience, who wants to do that, do it. And I know that's not like the easiest, logistical thing to do, but it's awesome. It's there. It's so much more exciting to watch. I think it's more fun. I think it kind of gets you in the race mode. I loved getting in the water in Madison and treading water for 3 or 4 minutes with your friends and your buddies, like before the race cannon goes up. It's just a really special experience. I'm not saying that the time trial start isn't special, but to me it got me like in the race mode before. Like I felt like I was really competing versus I'm just kind of going to do the same thing by myself around other people. Like that's the difference for me. Like, and the same thing when I did Ironman Florida, which is my first full, which is like forever ago, that, you did a legit beach start. Like you ran into the water, everybody, they had you self-seed, like, hey, are you going to be towards the front? You can swim like under an hour. But it was just like, you go. And the nice thing about the beach start is that nobody cheats unless they're going to legit swim up front, because you'll get swam over in the first 50 feet because people are running. Because in Panama City Beach, like if you're an athlete that's about to do that race, like depending, and this is why doing that, like a pre-swim on that course is even more beneficial, is because a lot of times, depending on the tide and how things have been with the weather, you can run for the first 100 yards. If you have if you know how to run in, with like the water being up like a foot or even 2 feet, like you can run or dolphin dive 100 to, like I remember when the year that I did the race, you could dolphin dive like 250 meters out because it was just so shallow. And then you'd hit a sandbar, and like people, it's harder to walk or swim when it's that shallow versus trying to dolphin dive or run. So it's a great course, but people were like, I don't want to get run over. They just stood in the back line. So it was just very, very easy flow. People know what the way that it should. Yes, I miss the experience. I think it's going to be, like you said, fascinating to watch how race directors and management companies, and even it's going to dictate, and I guess this is more of a prediction than anything, is like I do think it's going to dictate what cities get Ironman races going forward, in terms of if we are going to be stuck in this cycle of not doing out and back courses, or not doing, things where you're going to have to come across other lots. Like when they go to cities, it's okay, we're going to add a 70.3 in 2022 in May, and it's down to, 3 random cities. That's going to be a huge part of it, is who's going to be able to make this logistical change happen, even though they might get a better deal from, some random, city in North Dakota. They might think, oh, well, we're going to have to go back down to Texas, put on another one, because, the way that things lay out logistically, we can do it there without having to go out and back. So I think it's going to play a part. And I would fully imagine that all race companies, not just Ironman, but all race companies are looking at it, whether there's a small, grassroots one or a mom and pop one, all the way up to Ironman and Challenge. Like they're looking for ways to plan a year or 2 years down the road for this to still be here. And if it's not, great. And we're not having to like make adjustments to racing and how we do things. If it's not, great, but they're going to have to plan on that in order to keep their business alive and thriving, to let more and more athletes continue to participate. Because Arizona 7.3 was a small race. Thing ended up being like 650 to 700 finishers. I think like 850 signed up, which it's always a smaller event, but I think the attrition rate was a little bit higher when you look at it, and you can't always judge it based on how many athletes actually finished the race, versus actually towed the line and started, because it ended up being a brutal day. Like it was, I think, like when I checked the weather while Molly was running, it was like 98. Like it was a absolutely brutal, which is brutal for October if you live anywhere except for basically Arizona or New Mexico or Texas or a place like that. So it was definitely a harder day. But then also, like you look at It'd be interesting to see. Like Texas 70.3 is coming up, which is a race I've signed up for, which is in November. You got Florida, the Florida races. You got the full in Arizona. I'd really be interested to see like the people who like what the percentage of people who show up to the races, and is it because like let's say there's 2,000, 2,500 people sign up for Arizona or Florida, and then only 1,500 people show up. Is it because, and I think this is probably a survey they should do, but then you're also entrusting people to be honest about it. It's like, are you not showing up because you don't feel like it's safe? Or are you not showing up because 8 weeks ago you hopped on the nobody's going to be racing this year bandwagon,
right?
And you quit training and called an A. And now you're worried about not completing the distance, or not being as competitive as you want to be, And so I think that would be an interesting, because I imagine it'll be a much smaller number compared to what it usually is. Which again also gives the races a better opportunity to happen, because people aren't going to race because they either don't feel comfortable. And I mean, I would tell you from personal, my own personal knowledge is that this athlete is very, proactive in being, and responsible in, everything that's going on with COVID. So I think it's going to kind of a personal preference, but I would love to know, is it because you just stopped training, and you just said, I don't want to do it. It's a bit long, especially for races that have been so long, like November races, you're training for them in January, February, your eyes on the prize. And you have this whole year with, 8,000 people saying, you're not racing this year. It's not going to happen. Just defer. No one is racing. It's my favorite tagline this year. No one is racing in 2020. You better look to 2021, because no one is.
Nobody.
No one was correct. No one was correct about that.
And I also think people are probably caught up in this idea of even if it does happen, what's it going to look like? Maybe I'll just defer and,
which I think is fine. Like if it's your first one, I get it, because people who this is their first time, the next one they probably do is going to look drastically different. I feel like this year has a lot of this year with races and staying engaged in the process, and especially the long training days you have for 70.3s, fulls, or even marathons. It's those are hard, long days when you see other people out just going out and grilling and watching games, and you're like, God, here I go, another 16, 17-hour training week while all my buddies are not doing anything. Yeah. To me, the whole year has been that decision of you're at mile 14 or 15 of the marathon, and you're like, God, it would feel good to walk. And in the walk being, I'm just going to scale my training down. I'll just defer to next year. Races aren't going to happen. I'm ready to take it easy. And then you see that you haven't deferred officially yet, but then you get but then you kind of scale things back mentally. And I think that's the hardest part for athletes, especially the ones I know that I've worked with. Once they've mentally kind of accepted that a race probably isn't going to happen, and they mentally take a step back, it's not that they can't get back physically. It's that they've just kind of reset their brain into, all right, I'm no longer engaged. And to ask them to kind of get that back has been very challenging. So it is. I think it's a lot. There's a good analogy there between should I walk? Does it feel so good? But then once you start walking, man, is it hard to run again and convince yourself to go back to, because it feels easy. And now you're asking yourself to go back to something that's so painful that you decided that walking was the best option. And I know how you feel about walking the marathon. Anyway.
Well, no, I've kind of eased up on that a little bit, if it's prescribed or if it's planned. But it's just, I fully get what you're just saying right there, because and then that to me it was this tough year with a little bit of injury, but in my mind I'm I kind of knew it was mental, even though I've been talking about it a lot, and how plantar fasciitis can definitely linger and all these other things. But I last week signed up for Chattanooga next year. It was kind of a win, but I knew I needed something, and I just kind of I was saying, I felt like this season was kind of going to be weird, and I wasn't too excited about any of the races, even if they were going to happen at some point. I just got in this I don't know. I'm not really feeling it. So I kind of shut off, man. It was even harder for me just to get going in general. Plus I had the injury thing. And then this last week at trail, I guess what I'm getting around to is sort of what's going to inspire us a little bit, and I was out here, we had trail camp, and everybody's running, a couple times a day, or a recovery run or hike, or doing all this stuff. And I was kind of lingering around and everything. And I'm just watching. And at some point I was out there taking pictures and video and things like that. And I just started kind of I couldn't find anybody, because it was really hard to shoot video because they all ran away from me the whole time. So I was like, well, I'm going to just start. And I had my little camera, and I'm kind of just slow old man jogging on the thing. And it just started feeling good for some reason. And I was like, all right, well, this feels okay. And I took it real easy. But I think the environment that we were around, and everybody was just so like, all right. And that's how it always is here at these camps, is like, it just amazes me that people have that attitude. It's sort of that thing, what we were saying before, is like, instead of finding your why, find your why not. It's like, let's just go. And everybody just keeps going. And I'm watching all this in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, man, I want to be a part of that. And
positive peer pressure, man.
Yeah, I was like walking, and it wasn't really hurting. And it's been on and off. And it's been actually getting a lot better underneath the surface the last few weeks. But I was like, all right, this might be the time. And I was like, at first I tried to talk myself out of it. I said, this would be absolutely the worst way to try and come back, is running hills on trails, you know?
You mean, you're not wrong. Like that feeling wasn't like some like subconscious way of being like, no, Mike, just stay back in the safe zone like you have all year. Like, that's actually an intelligent, like if you'd asked me to have been like, yeah, dude, this is not the smartest, brightest way. Yeah. But maybe knowing that or thinking that made you actually do it the right way, because you then became overly cautious, knowing that it probably wasn't the most ideal way to get things moving and starting.
100%. Because when I was up in Madison a month ago, I went out and ran. We ran along the lake, and I was like, it feels pretty good. And I went out, and I got out too far, and I decided, like I always do, is like, well, I got to negative split this. So I went even harder in the back, and it was just dumb. But the reality is like, in my mind, I was like, lately I've just been like, it's just such a big mind game sometimes, some of these nagging little injuries, I think. And I'm just like, I thought to myself, I'm going to go at a pace, at a way, in a place, on a softer territory. And then I ended up caving in and getting hokas, and went out like the next day and walked around in them, and they felt great. I'm like, damn it, here I go. But, well, whatever feels good. And I just said, go slow. It was forced me to go so slow that it was actually a positive healing step, in the sense of
no pun intended.
Exactly. It's creating that blood flow, but without strain. And those are the things that sometimes have to be forced into our brain, you know. And I got to be honest, man. I told you I did a run walk on my own yesterday. I was just out of the blue, and I did the same kind of thing. I ran actually most of it except the uphills, and maybe a 5K or something like that. But how
do you feel today?
I feel really good. And,
so you know what
it's that, you know what else I feel? I know that I push too hard when I run all the time, because I can feel a slight tinge in my hamstrings, but it's not bad. But that's the same one that always bothers me. And I think I always run too fast on my training. I just summed it up yesterday.
A walk in the hills of
Chattanooga.
Sometimes
you just have to really see it for yourself.
No, it's true. Listen, there's a lot there that I like, and that one of the biggest things, though, I think, is that you were optimistic about it. You know, and I think like that is a very huge piece of what these successful athletes, the ones who have gotten positive things out of this year, have chosen to kind of the mask they've chosen to wear this year is optimism. You know, and I think there's a sometimes we can confuse optimism with being naive or arrogant. You know, like, I'm just optimistic. Race is going to happen. Like, you're just being, you know, naive. Like, you're just being stupid. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, especially when we're talking about this kind of thing, like, when has optimism ever hurt you? You know, like in this kind of a way, like, oh, well, races aren't going to happen, so you're just going to like keep training. Yeah, guess what you're also going to do? You're going to get better. You're going to become healthier. Maybe you're working on changing your body composition. Like, maybe you're going to find out things. Like, for me, for example, like I basically barely hopped on my bike at all for like 2 years, and was just running, and I was training for a level earlier this year, and you know, trail races are still happening, and there's kind of things you know, the hub was opening, and you know, we're in quarantine, and kids at home for 100 days, not in daycare, and like all these things are happening. It's like, this is not the year to be thinking that you're going to pick back up into, like, this is like the opposite of the perfect year, a perfect time to get back into the, you know, sport, and like get back on the bike, maybe get back in the pool, keep things going. This is not it. But I was like, it felt good and it felt right. And it wasn't arrogance. It wasn't like, well, you know, hopefully I can race, and then if it's not, I'm just going to quit. It was just like, I have this healthy optimism that things are going to go right. And even if I don't race in a month, I will still have gained so much the last 2 things. I've become fitter. I've definitely lost a bit of weight. I'm feeling about as good as I've felt in probably 3 or 4 years in a lot of ways, even being, 3 or 4 years older. Like, and if a race doesn't happen, like, who cares? I'll race again next year. But what I've gained has been irreplaceable, because if I hadn't have done it, then I would have continued that. I'll just keep waiting until the first green light comes, and then I'll hop back on the horse, and who knows how I would feel then? Maybe life, is different, or maybe my time management is different. But I think there's a whole lot to be said for that positive optimism and of just being like, like with your heels. Like, I feel like, being around other people with peer pressure. It's just so much of life is taking everything we do out of self, because we get so wrapped up in our fragility, but also our ego, all at the exact same time. Like it is like we can't sometimes unravel or unmesh like how the thoughts and the feelings that we have around training or around racing or around what our expectations are or what we're truly scared of, because those two pieces, the fragility of who we are and what we're afraid of, plus our ego, are basically like side by side, and sometimes they're so close we can't tell which one is who. And so we have like, do you want to push through? Do you want to pull back? And like, where do you balance that healthy optimism of what I know and I can gain from this is something that's good, and that's the other piece about it that I think is so important for athletes to understand, is that you don't have to analytically and data-driven define everything that you do. It can also just feel good, and that makes it something that is good. And like I briefly mentioned this in passing, kind of in my weekly check-in email, which was that I do 99% of my training alone. That's just what I do. I don't mind it. It's not. I don't think it's bad or good. It's just as long as I get it done. But this weekend, I couldn't have cared less. What my pace was, how far a distance I went. I just enjoyed being around other people, and it just felt good and it felt right. And at the same time, I was running twice a day. Like, I did 12 or 13 miles on Saturday and 12 or 13 miles on Friday. Like, I got in good mileage, but I was so taken out of myself and like, what were my numbers for today? What was the total mileage, that I had? And was this fast enough? It was just like, I got in good fitness, like things that are good, without being so wrapped up in, I have to define this as, this is me getting faster today because I can accurately depict what's going to happen from going forward, or it was better than my last true run, this exact same distance, exact same route. We always have to go back and compare things, but nobody ever compares the full picture. They just compare one small piece of it, and not what the days or months looked like before or after, or what your even life looked like. Right. It's like, oh, I crushed it today. And compared to last time, I beat this route by 2 minutes. And you look back and it's like, okay, well, today was 45 degrees cold. You're 5 pounds lighter. You don't have any stress and you're in great shape. The other time you did it was 90 days ago, and it was 110 degree and the dew point was 75. Like, it's not to poo-poo your accomplishment. It's just to say that we oftentimes become such prisoners of the moment that everything has to be great or everything is absolutely terrible. And there really is nothing in between, which is what it should be, which is like, this felt good. This was okay. Like that, because that kind of feeling and thought process, when you put into training and life and racing, that's the stuff that's sustainable. The expectations that we get from ourselves, and this is something I said to an athlete last week who asked about how they become better, and I said, that's it. You are a prisoner of the moment. It is either the worst workout ever, and you need to rethink everything you're doing in life, or we should truly consider signing up for the Olympics, because there is no in between. Yeah. Like, it is just one or the other. And the fact of the matter is that like 99.9% of the workouts that we do should just be, as Chet Doze would say, meh. It was just okay. It was just as expected, or it was okay. And that's become such the opposite of what so many people think, is like, but most of your workouts should be average and okay and not exciting, but we crave the excitement. And I do think other athletes as well actually do crave the chaos that a bad workout or a failed expectation can bring, because then it puts them in a panic mode to then fall into making different changes or signing up for different races or doing things totally different. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a time and a place for that failure, as you've talked about a lot of times. And for me, the whole thing about it is, you crave that excitement of looking at the numbers later, maybe. All right. Or let's say you're going into some kind of workout. Let's say you went into this weekend's one of those runs in mind of this, you had a target of some kind of heart rate or speed or whatever the case is, you immediately set yourself up before the workout to put a lot more tension on that workout, right? And I guess my point is that you went out and probably, I'm not going to say you could have hit your like highest goal or whatever, but you probably weren't as far away from it as you thought. You know what I mean? Like if you had something in mind and went out there, you probably ran pretty hard and pretty good and got a lot out of it. But sometimes I think when we put the number goal on our palette before we go out there, it creates just a tension that doesn't allow it to happen. Like I think about this all the time. Like when we have camps and we go out to the Natchez Trace and do the ride, and I compare what I do. Like usually I kind of hang around people and make sure everything's cool, and we're just riding. And then on the way back, I start feeling good, and I ended up kind of like, pretty close to what I would have done if I would have went out hard and came back hard. And I think it's a weird thing because there's something to be said for just sort of like going out with the idea of enjoying the ride and just riding steady. But like when we used to ride back in the day, it was like, trunk shut and we're just flying right out of the, it's like, and those were always miserable rides to me. I mean, we could do them and they were like kind of quote unquote epic or whatever back in the day and we rode hard. But like now it's like, you realize that you don't have to like go out that hard, and then it's so much more rewarding to come in strong and feeling good at the end. And I think that like those things layered on top of each other really do build up and do just about as much, if not more, for your training as those things where you're just like from the get-go going to go crush it.
I think, and we touched on this a little bit last week, which feels like 7 weeks ago, but was the difficult balance that we all have with, we briefly, not briefly, but we touched on like the physical, emotional, and mental aspects of choosing races and the timing and the distance, because, it's so many times athletes forget that they're not just athletes. They're only athletes for a very small part of their day. They're just like humans, their dads, their moms, their, best friends, their sons, their daughter, like whatever you have the majority of your life is spent doing something totally different than triathlon. Right. But we always get so wrapped up in, that we're a triathlete and that we're an Ironman, that we do these special things. Right. We're very special people. And, but what I think we forget oftentimes, that's like more of a stress thing and being objective, but is when we do workouts, we always have this kind of tug of war between what our body wants to do and what our mind wants to do and what we're really feeling that we want to do. Mm-hmm. And they can intersect. Sometimes they will totally agree. Sometimes they will wholeheartedly disagree with each other. We all have that. Like you see it all the time in Training Peaks comments. That's why I think it's so great to like not have expectations till you do a warm up. It's like you might get on the bike and feel like, man, I am going to crush it today. Yep. Like you just have that feeling. You expect that you're going to dominate. You haven't asked your body. You haven't checked in. You haven't done a warm up. You haven't tested things out. But you're like, I'm gonna crush this. And then you take 10 or 15 minutes warm up, and you think, oh my God, this is going to be the longest ride of my life. Or you're outside. You've been going 40 minutes. You're like, I'm gonna pull over and check my tire pressure. I feel like my brakes are rubbing. I probably lost a bit of pressure. And so I think there's like this really, and I feel like we should always be fairly flexible with this. Like I did this myself this last Monday. I found myself in a very different place than I expected to feel. We had just done the 70.3 weekend with our athletes, and I ran about 14 miles, ran with an athlete. And then the next day I was going to have like a fairly easy, longer ride just to kind of flush the legs out.
Right. But
for some reason, mentally, I was thinking, and then my harder ride was going to be Tuesday, but then I just mentally had this like feeling of like, today is easier for me to wrap my brain around doing this hard one versus doing, a longer one. And so I was like, well, I don't really know if my legs are going to agree or disagree with that, knowing that I had the harder, longer run the day before. Like, I space things out with a purpose, because it makes more sense to do a long run and then an easy ride to give yourself some time to recover than your hard ride versus backing up a hard ride to a hard run. Usually doesn't make sense. And mentally, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to check in. I'm going to do my 35 minute warm up and see where my legs are, see where my mind is. And then if my legs feel like trash, then I'll just continue on with my easy ride. But if they feel even just remotely okay, I think I might give it a whirl today and see if I can at least somewhat, because I think that's what a lot of times, that's what racing is, when we feel like we have this incredible amount of fitness, but in our mind and our emotions are there, but our body is like, not today. And you have a hard time wrapping your brain around, why wasn't this good? I've been fit. I've been showing that I have all this fitness. Why didn't it get expressed today? Is because one of those three or two of those three, or sometimes all of them, are just, they've gone haywire and they just disagree with each other. Another time could be you're going to a race and you're just so down and you're so out and you think there's no way you can have a great race because things have been crazy and life is stressful, and your body's like, dude, I am ready. Like, let's just do this. And you have like the best race of your life, among so many of their stress and life obstacles. And so I did that. And then I ended up probably having one of my best rides of probably like the last 2 or 3 years. And it wasn't because I don't think it was because I'm at this new fitness level. I think it was because I had a very lucky day of my mind. I was in the same place mentally and emotionally and physically to do this one thing versus one thing tonguing at another. I wasn't distracted. I was in a zone. I mean, I freaking went for 60 minutes about as hard as I could with just headphones, watching basically nothing. And the next day, there's no way I'm going to do that, because I remember thinking like the way things rolled out the next day, I was like, thank God I did that yesterday, because I don't have the mental capacity today to hold that and do that. And of course, it could have been more of a result of I did it the previous day, so I kind of burnt that mental and emotional match. But so much of what we do with racing and training is about marrying that mental, emotional, and physical, triad, I guess, if you will, is like, and if they're all connected, or if you. This is something you and I have been talking about for like the last 8 years, is like, creating a scale for athletes that's like you rate yourself. And I think today's plan actually does this, but like when you wake up, you rate yourself on a scale of 10, mentally, emotionally, physically, about where are you, and each one is graded differently. And then that actually dictates the kind of workout you get for the day of where you are. And I just think it's a complex piece because there's so many moving parts. But if you think about it, the most complex piece of that are the pieces that we rarely ever take into account, which is the mental and emotional aspect of everything that we do, because life demands so much more mental and emotional stress and energy and activity than it does physical. And yet we totally, poo-poo that into where it's all physical, man. Just, keep your head down and grind. And like your body, your body's going to do it like that. Your mind tells your body what to do. Like, it's not vice versa. Your mind tells your body what to do. So you have to be able to tell it what it needs to do, and then it has to ultimately agree.
That's that Cody Beals thing, kind of that I've always kind of, I think, done naturally, and sort of my philosophy has always been ease into everything you do. And I think in your case, after running 14 miles a day before, relatively hard, and then you wake up, and then I think when we kind of come off something like that, and it's the old adage of, man, I felt terrible this day, and it ended up being one of my best runs ever, is it sort of like forces you to ease in. And I think I'm just such a big proponent of warming up the engine. And I think when we feel good and we're like, yeah, I'm going to go out and crush it today, we go out too hard, and then all of a sudden it creates a little bit of an overheat or a little bit of overextension in everything we're doing. And I think it may be one of those deals where, yeah, I feel great today and I'm going to go out and run. And then about mile 4, you're just like, oh my God, I feel terrible now. And I wonder if that's because of that. You feel so good that you go out too hard. And then the next thing you know, your body's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Instead of like being prepared to finish strong, now you're holding on for dear life, versus the other way around, when you go out and you're forced to go out slow because you're a little sore or fatigued naturally, and then your body like kind of warms into it. I think there's something really great to be said about that. But that Cody Beals thing was sort of like, he talked about that, right? How he sort of wakes up and then decides what he's going to do a lot of times. And that's always been my thing, is like, man, I don't feel it today or whatever. And then you get out there and then you're like, like you. I think I'm going to go. And I think when it presents itself like that, you got to go. And that's the thing about it. It's like, man, everyone who has a workout, and let's say you don't have it, and then you just force those intervals and you force yourself to go, that can set up problems for days. And it's like, man, there has to be the confidence in the understanding of who you are and what you want to do in the long term to be able to pull back from some of these things. And, but our tendency is always, right? It's always like, man, I feel terrible today, but I got to crush this interval to prove to myself. And, because I'm, it's almost like
tough.
Take it out on this workout. Yeah. And it's like you're taking it on yourself. It's sort of a twisted kind of way to punish yourself if you're not feeling like you want to do it. So
stress is stress. Like that's like we can't say that enough. Is like how warped most people's like perception of how you combat stress is. It's like, oh, well, my day's been super terrible. I've got to go out and run super hard, creating significantly more stress on your body than what you should be doing. It's just very counterintuitive to what I think society pushes, and it's like, go hard or go home. And you can work off 5 hours of sleep and you got to keep working. Like you got to keep the ground side. No, like it's about the best return on your investment, getting the most that you can done in the smallest amount of time while being really smart about it. And yeah, you want to listen to your body. You don't want to go out and run hard every day because you feel like it. You have to be smart enough. And like the smartest athletes are the toughest because they show restraint. Right? It's not because they just fly off the handle and let their ego run wild. Like, and like every once in a while, it's totally fine. Have at it. But it's good to do it if you do it within reason and responsibly, not 5 days a week. It's also, like I wouldn't have thought, okay, well, I've got to run today, but I've also got this hard run later. Let me run hard today. I'm like, that doesn't make sense as a match. I can probably do it on the bike because it's no impact. So I'm going to be fine to do it. It's a very, I think, complex way to, and you don't want to overthink it either, which is also a hard thing. That's why you should just strictly go with, hopefully what your coach tells you to do. But it's a hard balance. And I also think that it's something that we should take into consideration when we race. It's, you just never know what's going to happen. I think athletes oftentimes so much like surprise themselves when they train, yet they become like shocked for the first time ever when they race that things go one way or the other, because racing is just like training. Like you don't know what you're going to get when your body wakes up. You just don't. Like you could wake up expecting to feel like $1 million and your body's like, you know what? Not today, man. I need to kind of rein things in and keep it chill today. Or you could wake up feeling like, I got no sleep last night. I'm super stressed. And you hop on the bike and you're like, hello, legs. Like, I'm ready to do this. It's just, we just never know. That's why, like you said, it's you can't warm up long enough, to figure out who you are for the day. You don't want to ever jump to conclusions about how terrible or how great your day is going to be. You got to kind of just ride it even, and I know that's not the greatest way to, probably for some people look, it's like everything changes all the time. And if you're so on the offensive that things are going to go great and things are going to be spectacular, then when you do get punched in the mouth, the fall is going to suck, right? It's going to be like, oh, I just ruined my perfect day. Or it could be like you made a really crappy first pot of coffee and you're like, today's going to be terrible. Today's going to be the worst day ever. And then if you had have been more open-minded that the day was going to turn around, you would be looking for things that are like, this is actually going to be a really, really good day. But instead you're like, today's terrible.
Yeah, it's that loop, right?
I've had the worst day. The worst
mental
day ever.
loop
and
that you start off with.
And we do that with training and how you warm up and how you look at things and how you try to execute and your effort and the mindset that you have going in. It's so much driven by where you are and what you're capable of harnessing and developing and then using mentally and emotionally. It's going to dictate more of your workouts and how you are physically. But you have to give yourself and your body time to you want to give them time to communicate. It's like you have to let your mind and your mind and your heart really talk to your body, and then them talk about hey, where are we at today? All right, I'm kind of feeling this. Well, I'm kind of feeling this, and then it's like, all right, well, we're gonna come to a consensus and
let's work it out.
Let's work it out, and this is what we're doing today. But if you try to force one or the other, you're going to end up paying for it, just like you would, like getting into argument with, a spouse or a friend. It's like, let's talk this out, or we can just, try to force our own agenda down into the throat and then ending up hating each other even worse. And then that's where you're at. Nothing, and then nothing becomes accomplished other than wasted time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that translates into regular life too. I mean, I think back to when I was in my corporate days, getting up late, kind of just right out of bed into the fire, meetings, screaming, people angry, the whole thing is just rarely ever warmed into that day. It was almost like I needed, like a 4-hour warm up before I faced any of that stuff. And it just always became a mental loop. And then it's just reach for the coffee and, you're doing the opposite of probably what's needed or necessary. But yeah, I don't know, man. I'm really excited about it. I mean, like I was thinking back to when I was really enjoying running, I guess last fall after the race. And I kind of got into this run walk thing, and it was sort of, I love what you said about the toughest athletes are they're best at resisting, because they can pull back, and when they need to. And I think that's sort of what I was just really enjoying this idea of going out and doing run walks. And it was like the first time in a long time that running was truly enjoyable. And I think I got that feeling yesterday because I was not going for anything. I was really the only agenda I had yesterday was, getting through that thing and making sure that I felt good. I wasn't, my heel wasn't hurt. I mean, that was it.
That's it. It's simplified. Like, I'm not looking at my pace. I'm looking like, well, if I can run this game or that, I got to beat last time, because last time to this route, I was running 9:20s and my heart rate was 147 and my average heart rate was 153 overall. Like, I got to beat that, or something bad's happening. Instead of like just simplistically looking at it as, I'm doing this, it feels good, and I want it to feel good. That's it. Like it really is like that simple. That's like how much so much training should be, versus like how over analytical people have become on judging themselves, while also not fully understanding like what is really needed to be successful in endurance sports. 90% of it's boring. Like, it's just, that's how it is. Like 80 to 90% of what you do in endurance sports is boring. It's easy zone 1, zone 2 work that should make you feel really, really, really good and just get more and more and more efficient. And that's so many people overthink, and then like, I just don't know why things aren't working out. And then you get burnt out, and then you hate what you're doing, and you don't feel like you're improving. I'm like just keep moving. And like, good, like that's the thing, is like the more good days you have, they end up adding up to something great, right? And like, that's how you should look at life. That's how you should look at training, is like all these good days that just feel good, they're also going to make you want to do them more because they just felt good. There was no expectation. You don't look back and you're like, well, let me compare October 15th Z2 ride to my August 14th Z2 ride. And where was my heart rate? And was it like, am I getting better? I'm like, hard pass. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to train like that. I get on my bike, I ride aerobically 9% of the time, then I'm like, and then bye. See you later. Like, I don't get wrapped up in, I need to compare it to last Tuesday, because last Tuesday is going to tell me if I'm getting faster, because that's 6 days ago. And you're going to see a huge difference no, it's just you accumulate 300, 400, 500 hours of good quality work. And, oh, look, hey, one day you wake up and you're like, I have no idea how I did that. That's how it should be. But all those good days that feel good, that feel nice, that make you feel energetic, that aren't super exciting and can sometimes be boring, those are what add up to great races. You have to do this. But the other part of that is it does keep you mentally and emotionally engaged, because it's fun. Like, it's good. Like, you get something out of it that's positive. You're not living in this and training in this fear of, this has to be better. I have to do this better, or I'm not getting fast enough, or I'm not going to beat so-and-so, or I'm going to compare myself, and I've got this expectation. Like, I don't know how this sport is fun. I honestly don't. If you're constantly living in, so even I have some athletes, I have to have like hard conversations with them. Like it sounds like you're miserable. Like, and that's honestly, like, if that's how you want to operate, then that's fine. But I don't really want to coach that, because it's miserable, and you're missing the point, right, of training for endurance sports and training in general, being healthier, and the things you can do for your mind and your body, and then the opportunity to race. And I can't fathom and wrap my brain around that. Do you think this was good enough? Like that phrase that you hear, it's like the most hated, like, cringeworthy phrase I get from athletes. Like, do you think this was good enough? What do you mean, do I think this is good enough? Like, did it feel good? Yeah. Then therefore it is good. Like, there is no, like, stop. There is no like step 2, 3, and 4. But we do that. It's like, well, we need to really peel the layers back and feel not just that it was good, Mike, but how good was it? Or was it great? Or did you feel like it did well? Yeah. You think it did good? Perfect. Move on. Congratulations. Like, you've been a successful human being today and done something that you really loved and enjoyed. Like, it really is that simple. We compare and contrast and like do everything with people, with how much money they make and what car they drive and how fast they're getting and what their times are. I'm like, just like, did you have fun? Yeah. Did you enjoy it? Yeah. Do you feel better? Yeah. Okay. we don't need to go any steps further. But people, I genuinely think, especially triathletes, don't like to, because then if they stop there, then they're like, wait a minute, what else do I can't obsess over anything. I need to find something to obsess about. Like, let me peel back layers till I can find something. Oh, got it, coach. I know this is a great run, and I crushed it, and I feel incredible, and it was so energetic, and I love what I was doing. I was outside with my friends, but look back. Mile 3, the cadence, dropped it. 3, I went down from a 180 cadence in the run to a 177. We got to address that. What do you think I can do better on? I'm like, well, you can do better on giving yourself a fucking break.
I like that, dude.
That's what it's true.
It
but
is,
people do that all the time.
I know as you were talking, I was reminded of that thing, that you say, it's better to go into a race 100% undertrained than 1% overtrained, or something like that, right?
It is. That's what I say.
So why not take that approach into training? It's better to go into tomorrow 100% undertrained than 1% overtrained, because that 1% keeps snowballing. It's a similar philosophy, I think, I think it would be a good kind of a guiding mantra of sorts to be like, don't overtrain yourself because it just keeps going. And that 1% overtrain can really play havoc with your mind, man. I think if you're just sort of in that kind of, cycle of always having that just a little bit like fatigued and overtrained and like miserable, it just keeps going. And I think that might be something to think about, like, because I always talk about like that. For me, the goal is to want to come back tomorrow and do it again. And that's like a mental thing so much. Like I'm just sitting here right now just thinking about running that trail.
I see you got your trail shoes already tied up and laced up with your socks on.
I do. I mean, I could go right from this chair out to that.
You should.
I might.
I highlighted this. This is probably a good way to like wrap it up and close, is that I think last Zoom meeting I did, because I took a break last week, but the last Zoom meeting I did, I went through a very short kind of like spontaneous 5 or 6 week only Ironman build that an athlete of ours did. It was very first one, but the opportunity arose to do an Ironman distance race on a very challenging course, and he rattled off like an 11:30 or something like that, which is a very impressive like debut at a very hard course on kind of short notice. And I was going through the training cycle in the block with athletes on a Zoom call, just kind of going through what I saw and what I was expecting and then how things went. And I highlighted one specific workout that I thought was what made his entire training block, which is what made the ultimate block successful. And it was a bike ride that he cut short. He got a flat tire on a long ride, had a mechanical on his main bike, and pulled it back in the garage or something, and then hopped on a different bike that had a different fit. And after about 20 minutes, he started to get knee pain, and he was like, "It's not worth it. I'm calling it a day." And I was like, bravo. Which most triathletes would be like, I've got to get the time in. No matter what. I know I'm hurting, but I can make it. Because if I don't get the time in, I'm not going to finish this race. I've got to do this. It's that ego. It's that, I've got to be, this is what tough is. This is what tough people do. And I was like, this right here probably made his race. Not in that might sound overblown, but if he does ride 2.5, 3 hours more, he's probably hurt. Right. And the biggest thing from almost every athlete is getting to the taper of an Ironman healthy. No niggles, no pains, having a good build. What's one ride going to do, or shortened ride, compared to missing the next 5 or 6 days in an already condensed cycle? That was it. And that was a good overall decision, but balancing like the mental and emotional and physical like conversation that we have to have, and like what is good and what is bad. Is it bad to stop a workout, or is it bad to continue a workout? Right. And like you said, like, making those good decisions each and every day is like, you should be, his objective was to be able to wake up the next day and do that one. Right. If you can't answer that question in a way that's going to say, yeah, I can do tomorrow, then you need to keep asking yourself, what am I doing right now to make sure that I can do tomorrow? And then tomorrow, what can I do tomorrow to make sure I can do the next day and the next day? Because that's how you build consistency. That's how you build, days upon weeks, upon months, upon years of really, really great training that leads to really spectacular results.
Nice.
And there goes Mike to run the trail. No, that's it. Hey, we appreciate you as always. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you giving us your time. especially as we are kind of a day late. So, but hey, day late, right on time. If you haven't been, cruise on by our website, C26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community, and also the new C26 Club program that Mike's heading up that he mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast. You can click on the coaching tab, scroll down, I think, 3 or 4 spots to the club, read through that. Let's take care of your year. We'd be happy to do it, remove some stress, point you in the right direction, and have fun while we do it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about anything and everything, you can email me, c26coach@gmail.com, or if you have any for Mike directly, he is at crushingiron@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. I'm heading to the trails.
See you, dude.
See ya.